In spite of a volatile quarter, BlackRock is celebrating a more than 20% increase in assets and record high revenues. This chart shows net inflows of $75.31 billion, with assets being just shy of $10 trillion. To give a sense of the scope, BlackRock's assets amount to 50 times more than the fortunes of Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk.
And as BlackRock buys up America's homes for top dollar rent, almost 20% of U.S. households lost their entire savings during COVID. Almost a third of those making less than $50,000 annually, which had devastating impacts on Black and Latino households.
The Daily Poster highlighted the stark disparity between headlines, but more broadly, it shows how different classes have experienced the pandemic. So yeah, it's been pretty good for BlackRock, and while 1 in 5 people lost what savings they had, and we know that heading into the pandemic, almost half of Americans had no significant savings to speak of. So in order to you add on top of that 1 in 5 people losing what they did have, while at the same time you had savings rates explode for a lot of people who, whose income kept coming in and who no longer were spending money on, going out to eat, vacationing, and they watched their 401ks go up. You really had a tale of, different lives throughout this pandemic.
Well, BlackRock, the big problem with them is they're on track, I believe, in the next couple of quarters to have they're going to be managing $10 trillion. I mean, could you imagine this? This is more than most, I think every single other country even has in their banks, minus the United States and China. So BlackRock is massive. Elizabeth Warren is wanting them to be labeled essentially too big to fail, saying that if these guys go under, could you just imagine? I mean, this would be 10 times worse than what happened in 2008. And talking about people not having savings, people would lose their retirements. They would lose a lot of what they have if BlackRock were to go under. So she's trying to get them to be labeled as too big to fail. But the bigger problem with BlackRock, I think the overall why we should be sort of shining the light on them and the amount of wealth that they're able to, that they're managing, is that they're operating essentially as a shadow bank or even sort of a fourth branch of government. They own shares, at least 5% of shares, if not more, in every single major American corporation. So that means, when you own 5% of a corporation or more, you're able to pick up the phone and call the CEO pretty much at will. And that means that they have an enormous amount of influence. Obviously, the various companies that they're invested in have what seems to be conflicts of interest. Maybe you've got one that's wanting to do more for climate, but BlackRock also, and they're invested in that company, but they're also heavily invested in, let's say, the oil and gas industry, which they are. So, you've got this sort of, they're working for everybody's under their umbrella. They're wanting everybody to succeed because obviously they're a company that's trying to just make money. And so this kind of calls into question, who's really running the world?
Yeah,
is it we the people, or is it BlackRock, who owns a bunch of shares in every single corporation in America and many around the world?
Right, and what kind of power that buys them is probably the thing to be concerned. Look, I'm never really, I frankly don't care that much when just people making money, companies making money, good for them, that's fine. A lot of companies make money by providing us things we want. So the pandemic was horrible for us, but Amazon made it easier. The tech companies made it easier, so they made profits. Oh well, that's how the world works. That's how capitalism works. But in this case, the issue is, well, what kind of political power do they have, because they have such a kind of vast, tied up financial interests, stakes in so many companies, right? What can they tell them to do? What can they tell Congress to do? And so that's the reason, I think, to be concerned, which was what you were highlighting, Kim.
Right, and the amount of political power that they have is demonstrated by the fact that they have not yet been labeled as too big to fail, as they should be. Executives from BlackRock go in and out of both administrations, including the Biden administration. So, it does raise the question of where the power center is.
But does a too big to fail designation mean that I'm actually not sure. Is Warren trying to say that, well, we need then we would protect them if they went under or something because they would be too catastrophic because that would be
regulated.
Right.
Yeah,
It's a regulation.
I don't want to be
designation.
I don't want to be on the hook for their, bailing them out or
but
something.
her argument is you are on the hook. That
Yeah,
like they
right.
can't go under. Like they just
Right.
can't. $10 trillion, like that's like saying like the Treasury market just not going to fail. It just can't be allowed to fail. And if you acknowledge that it can't be allowed to fail, then there are responsibilities that BlackRock has to meet when it comes to capital requirements and, like Kim said, regulation that currently they don't get. So they get the implicit guarantee that the United States taxpayer, that the United States is going to bail them out if they fail, but they don't have the responsibility that comes with the explicit guarantee, which so Citigroup and others, we've said, okay, look, we didn't break you up, we're going to bail you out, but you have to. These are the capital requirements you have to have. This is taxes you have to pay. There's the regulations that you have to abide by. That's the ridiculous and imperfect bargain that we're at this point. But BlackRock doesn't even have to be part of that. But Warren and Kim are right that they should be, and we will have more rising right after this.